Brothers and sisters, let us in humility and in divine love receive unto us Mwalimu Dr. Chancellor Williams.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Testing, 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 testing.
Is that all right? Well, thank you for your wonderful greeting. And I thank our great brother and friend, Reverend Chancellor, for his great introduction. These introductions are the kind where one must steady himself. I hear them from time to time, and each time I hear them, I feel smaller and smaller, humbler and humbler. And I say to myself, always, when I hear elaborate praise, that I'll be safe and all right up to the moment I begin to feel proud and important. All right until I begin to feel great. When that happens, you can say, somebody should call St. Elizabeth or some hospital for the insane. But Brother William is slipping. But what we do in this world should be for one thing, and for one thing only. Should be because of our deep love for the people, in this case my race, for which I'm working, with no thought of honor, fame, money, just service. Coming tonight was sort of special. It had to be because I think it's very well known, or pretty widely known, that I do not accept all invitations. Try to be very selective, limiting them to colleges or organizations which promises to be doing something. Skipping over those, and these are the majority, which I decline to accept the invitation to speak, which simply have what they consider to be a list of prominent speakers on their program for the year to lecture as a part of the university program. So I always inquire, what is the university or the organization doing? What is it about? What is the occasion for? What is the follow? So I'm only interested in action. I'm only interested in a program of work, of planning, leading to action, designed expressly for the improvement of life among the African people, but on a broad scale. And the other reason that I limit talking, that I observed even as a boy, that seemed to be the biggest thing we did. We seemed to love our meetings and speakers, and I would often ask, well, what next? What follows? And there was always silence. My mother was a great one for attending conventions, church conventions. Sometimes they call them associations and so forth. Now, I remember one occasion distinctly when the delegates had returned and they were in the yard at our home talking about how much money was raised and how the Reverend Dr. So-and-so walked about in that great speech and so forth, and how Bennettsville raised more money than Florence, and Florence raised more money than Darlington, and how much the great total was, which ran into amazing number of thousands of dollars from a people at that time with an income so low that it was simply amazing to know how much money they could raise in that drive throughout the year, because that was the biggest activity throughout the year. So that when all the brethren had departed and my mother started in the house, I asked, well, what now? And she turned and looked. She said, what you mean, what now? She said, well, what is to be done now after the convention's over, all this money is collected? Because I was looking around at the conditions of the community, run-down houses, unpaved street. The last paved street stopped exactly where the last white residence stopped. The last water hydrant stopped at the same place. The last electric light. So in West Bennettsville, which was equivalent to Harlem, all blacks, run-down houses, a big ramshackle school with not even electric lights, needing everything. And yet, nobody was doing anything. The churches were doing nothing. We had 6 or 7 lodges raising money but doing nothing. Not even uniting enough to go before the city authorities and demand improvement. At least electricity for the schools. could have nothing there at night. No water in that section of the town. So I simply wanted to know why all these meetings, all this speaking going on, and nobody doing anything. Now who was talking? A youngster not more than 8 years old at the time. And it's one of the reasons I think I am always very proud to see more attention being given to children. For they began thinking about serious things far earlier than you imagine. It's not that I was so smart or bright or anything like that. That is what they'll say when you ask a lot of questions in order that you get back and appear dumb again. Or that you're precocious or you're brighter than the rest. No. Other children keep quiet because they're discouraged. But they begin to think and wonder early. And I began to think and wonder early about the conditions of my race as compared with the almost heavenly situation of the whites. Noticing at the same early age the great differences not only in the physical condition, not only in the kind of school that we had to attend, but also the kind of books. It was quite early that I became aware of nothing in our books, school books, no pictures except the pictures of whites. Everything was about white people. So I became aware as a child that I was getting white studies, that all of us were getting white studies from the very beginning. Now all of this early childhood background is significant, and I could go into more except that I decided to abridge what I was going to say in order not to be overlong. But it will give you some idea of where I am coming from, as to say in the general parlance, so to speak, because I found myself out of line, first of all, and most certainly with the white world. But again, I found myself in conflict with the attitude and amazed by my own race. So I was out of step with both the white and the black. With the blacks because of their acceptance of so much. I couldn't see why we, in our situation, bad as it was, should also have to accept the old used textbook after the white people had used them and pay for them. I couldn't see why the ministers, the teachers, had the backbone to walk up to the courthouse and to the city administration and say, no, we just won't accept it. Nobody having the backbone. Just a little thing like that. I couldn't see why the blacks didn't have the backbone. Preachers, teachers, or other people who were supposed to be in a position of some kind of leadership by the very reason of their position in the city, didn't have the backbone or the courage to say that our children must have more than 5 months a year in school. They didn't have the courage to do anything but accept whatever was handed down to them. And to accept it humbly. I was out of line with fellow students who were in the auditorium singing their little hearts out, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty," now looking with amazement. Land where our fathers died, land of pilgrim pride. And I had in my mind the pictures of the pilgrims landing, white people, the women with the white bonnets, the men with the broad hats and so forth, all white. But land where our fathers died, land of the pilgrim pride and so forth. Couldn't see any of that. Most fortunate of all, as a boy, all this is the background of why I wrote as I did, my studies as I did, and why it took me so long. Why it took me many years for the study, because I was certainly, most certainly, in no hurry. Absolutely in no hurry. So that when I finally arrived further on in pursuit of my studies, it all became clearer and clearer to me, because, as I said, the biggest thing that had probably happened was that it was still in early boyhood, and I never tire of telling this, that I learned not from my teachers, who couldn't tell me. Not from the preacher who was supposed was well educated. Wasn't one of these people that hadn't been trained. Well educated. That I was an African. And I learned that over a child's curiosity over the word Negro. This again is why I say pay more attention to children. Why curious over the word Negro? Well, I didn't like the way it sounded for one thing. And the fact that nigger was derived directly from it made it worse. But what put me on to questioning it was I noticed that other racial or ethnic groups in town, that you could tell the land from which they came by their name. We knew that the Greeks who ran the bakery were from Greece. The name suggested it. We knew that the Germans, Greeks, were from Germany. We knew that the Chinese who ran the laundry from China, the name. So why is it? When I was not a person who ran to the teachers first. I must have been a born research worker, because I would always try to look up things for myself first. I tried to find it, and I couldn't come across it in the dictionary. What was I looking for? I was looking for a word which suggested where we came from, since they played down the word Africa. we were not supposed to think of Africa only as a bad place of savages and cannibals. And if to say you came from Africa, you wouldn't want to believe it because it was made such a horrible place, a man-eating place, and a place that you should be on your knees every day, thanking God, except by His grace and that of the white man, you would have been lost, savage forever. So I was looking for a name something like Negro Land or Negrotia or Negrotania. Say, had to be Negro something to give it any validity. Couldn't find anything, then I went to the teachers. And the teachers couldn't tell me anything. Oh, you're an American, you're an American. Well, you see, I understood what they meant by that. I vaguely understood. It merely meant that I was born in America, but that I knew I was born in America. But so were the Greeks, the Germans, the Chinese, the rest of them, you see. So that didn't answer the question. And some present, well, I often tell this because it is my real background. This matter of knowing that you're African in childhood makes a world of a difference, and not beginning to know until the 1960s. So you see, I knew it long before you, most of you. Some of you haven't accepted it yet. I got it from an old ex-slave. He told me. He said, well, no. He said, your teachers were not quite right, son. He said, we're not Negroes and certainly not niggers. He said, you see the church just 2 blocks down from us there? I said, sure. That's the AME church. Well, what is the AME? What's the A for? What does the letter stand? Well, I didn't know. I just thought AME was the name of the church. He said, no, A, some of our folks didn't forget where we came from. The A is African. African Methodist Episcopal Church. That's what that is. So you're an African. You're an African. That Negro is just a name the white folks give us, a sort of nickname. You're an African. And I felt not 10 foot tall, but 20. And I've felt that way ever since. I'm an African. An African born in the United States, but an African. And that put me in conflict with the rest of the race, believe me. Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. So, you see, I've been outside, and you know, when I began to really write the history of the race, directly from the record, putting everything in, and not relying wholly upon what the white man has written, but trying to find out what was actually right. And I didn't go in, as I said a moment ago, looking for honors or anything of that kind, because when I went full-fledged into the research, I had already attained the highest degree one can attain in the field of learning. So I wasn't working for any degree or any honor or anything, just working for my race. I knew it would be one of those tasks that couldn't be rushed. Not what I was looking for. It was a sort of personal quest, you see. I didn't want any hearsay. I had heard a whole lot. I didn't want any hearsay. I heard many things that they said that we had achieved, but I wanted to verify it. By the time I was in college, I learned from the best authority that civilization itself started with the blacks in Africa. And I wasn't going to sit back on that. I wanted to verify that. I wanted to examine the nature of the civilization. I just immediately followed that up by saying that the civilization was due to external influences. I wanted to undertake a job which everyone said could not be done. I wanted to isolate the achievement of the African people from anything that the Europeans and the Asians had brought into Africa, so that I would know unmistakably, beyond all question, what kind of civilization the blacks themselves had achieved. And having achieved and having established beyond all doubt that civilization did begin with the blacks in Africa, the big problem then arose. What happened? What happened? If we were once the first people among the peoples of the earth, the foremost people, the people to whom scholars from all over the globe came to study and to learn and to take back and expand and to develop their own civilization, develop and shape their own religion, develop and shape their own sciences. How did it come about that I found myself and the rest of my race down at the very bottom, below all the other peoples of the earth, so that our very name and the very color of our skin became something to be avoided or ashamed of? What happened? What happened? See, nobody is going into that in detail. What happened? So he couldn't be in a hurry, you see. To make this part of it short, I found out that I was confronted not only with the study of history, but I found out that I had to draw upon not only what I had already knew in the field of sociology, psychology, anthropology, and such other fields which bore on early research. I had to even ancient civilization and artifacts of that civilization were determined, verified, and made historically accurate. Then I had to look for unpublished sources. I had to conduct inquiries as to how the whites went about effacing so much, so completely, of what we had done and transforming it so completely that the blacks, even today, looking at the products of their own ancient civilization, do not recognize it. They do not recognize, for example, that all the columns they see around on these big stately buildings are exact copies of African architecture. They don't realize it. They don't know that when they look at the Washington Monument, they're looking at an exact copy of the most ancient forms of African architecture building in stone. Well, we were the first builders in stone, and that was one of our most famous designs. Oh, they put the top of it way up in the skies, but you look at it, you're looking at an elongated pyramid. That's what it is. And that just begins it. Right on down the line, you could just write a book on things stolen from the race. And all this had to be traced out, verified. I decided then that I was going to go into all of this and to cover the whole field. And although I say that the study covered from 4,500 years before Christ to the end of this century, and I put it to the end of this century because I knew only too well that in the few years that separate us from now and the beginning of the 21st century, the conditions are going to be just about the same. I don't believe it's going to be any revolutionary change. Despite all you heard today, and I've been almost deafened with it, in celebration of the 5th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision. I've heard all of Whitey's Negro speakers extolling what wonderful progress we've made. Oh, what wonderful progress we've made. Now, in a sense, they were right. Because many of the great leaders, even some of the most militant leaders of the period, and following through the 1960s, when it amounted almost to a revolution, when it was a revolution, now have good paying jobs, high paying jobs. That's a strategy. I know of people who are most militant, who are most revolutionary, that the white authorities sought out or had their minions seek out to give a nice job. That'll fix it. That's all you have to do. No, I don't get that. No, I'm too young for that. Asking me how about having a seat for a while, and I feel better than he does. Yes, they are the people who now can speak. They have key jobs, big paying jobs, so of course they can talk about how much better it is for them, but not for the masses. Not for the thousand who are still without jobs. In other words, we have a leadership, speaking about the state of the race, which is no leadership. And that's one of the things that need to be stressed, that we are in a state of crisis. The race is in a state of crisis, and if I say nothing else tonight, I'm going to stress that, because it seems to me that it is a thing which I should stress if I speak at all, wherever I speak, that the black world what is happening to the black world while the black world sleeps, or seem to be sleeping. So many things are happening quietly, steadily, organized, aimed at nothing less than our destruction. And they were once very subtle about it, but they're not so subtle now. They come out, and if you just listen to them on the program, you see it's a grand design. It is no accident, my friend, that while unemployment decreases among the whites, it still decreases, I said, among the whites, down to almost a norm of 5.5%. You can be comfortable with that. But that doesn't mean anything for us, because it always increases. The same statistics. It's an increase, and it runs depending upon what section of the country you're talking about. Not just double, but it still runs 35% to 40% in certain areas, just as it did last year, just as it did the year before, and nothing has happened. Now I spoke of the great deception, and what is the great deception? By our leaders. The greatest deception, the greatest farce that is ever put on over by helpless people by its leader was the passage with the blessings of the Black Caucus in Congress of the empty, utterly empty Humphrey Hawkins full employment bill. Had nothing but the name, that is all. They couldn't pass it. After playing around with it for several years, finally Carter made it clear that it'd have to change some of the fundamentals, the key provisions in it, before he signed. In other words, they have to make it utterly useless. And then they passed it. Now my point is, while of course they couldn't get it through a white Congress, a bill that was really going to give employment to blacks as it was originally intended. During that same period, they got through a $3 billion employment bill so designed that practically all of the jobs went to white. It's easy to design them that way, you know. Just say to whether it's building and structure, construction or whatnot, that the money to be used for, and they have a technique of easily excluding blacks without saying it at all, you know. The employment bill, that was apart from the Humphrey Hawkins bill. Now, at least one member of the caucus, of course all of them should have rose up, and on a panel before the whole nation, advised the black America that nothing had been done, that the Humphrey Hawkins bill was a farce, then Senator Hawkins himself should have led. But he was satisfied just to have his name on a piece of legislation. But I bet you a white man, Humphrey, would have withdrawn his name before he would have let that pass had he been living. And nobody to speak for him. That is why one of the reasons things of this kind that you hear me calling for and standing for a nationwide organization of the race, the only kind of organization that's going to be able to protect, defend, and promote the interests of the whole race. And you have to understand one thing before I get from it about the nature of what is meant by organizing the race in a strong nationwide organization on a scale and in a manner that has never been done before. And you'll see why the kind of leadership we have do not wish to touch it, for one thing. First, it would mean that all classes of the society, not just the so-called upper or middle class, to form the membership. It would organize by families. Everyone from a trash truck driver, cab driver, waitress, right on through to the college president or what have you, because you're organizing the race. No line is drawn as to religion. You organize, as I state, since you're talking about a race now, not a denomination. You talk about the whole race. Should be of whatever religion you would want to be. What would happen, however, and religious leaders do not seem to have the vision to see what would happen in a national organization of several million. That their own organization couldn't fail to grow. Working not actively to promote their particular creed, but working to promote the race where everyone sees that everyone is working for the overall goal of the whole black community. And when you do that, I think you're on the way. But one thing we must be crystal clear. It would have to be based on just a few founding solid principles to start with that we don't want to bother about. And that's why many do not wish to touch it. You see it, what I stress in the master plan. One thing, I talk first of all about something. You see, I used to be a member of almost everything. I know how organizations work. I used to be a member of the Masons, the Oddfellows, the Pythias, the Elks, you name it. Our Chancellor was a member. So I know just how it works. And the people care nothing about the people's money, how they handle the people's money. And that was the number one thing. Emphasis on financial responsibility. Emphasis on trained financial management. Emphasis on strict methods of security with the people's money as the foundation. That has to be a number one thing. The fact is, efficiency, each for all and all for each. An old African, not a communist doctrine. Should be the real guiding stone. What's the purpose? The purpose to give us something we do not have now. One nationwide organization of Black America that will protect Black America on all fronts, national and international. And that will advance the interests of Black America.